back to the channel. Let's get into the next video. Today I want to have a look at the power steering in the VL. I'll go through a little bit of information in regards to what parts I used, steering rack, steering lines, etc. because it was a bit of a mix and match. All factory gear, but there are some parts you can use that will give you a little bit more clearance, make things work a little bit better. But before I get into that, I just want to say thank you to everybody who viewed my last video. There was a massive response to that. I've got a few comments, a few likes, some new subscribers as well. So if you're one of the people that viewed that video and you got some value out of the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. Keeps me motivated to keep doing these videos. Oh, and if you haven't already, maybe go back and have a look at some of the previous videos in the playlist. I'll see if I can do something about putting a card up here or something for you to click on, and it should take you straight back to those playlists. Okay, so from up the top here, there's not a lot to see. I'll try and get some of this wiring out of the way so you can try and get a better view of what. And yes, that was the little rubber grommet going flying out of the loom plug. So I'll grab that, we'll stick that back on. Okay, so we've got our factory power steering pump here in the front under that main conduit. You might be able to see off the back the two fittings. So we've got this one here is the low pressure return line. It runs down to the factory hard rail from the VL. That return line there was actually just something I found off the shelf at Super Cheap Auto. I was looking for something that had this 90-degree bend in it, 180-degree bend to get back down to the hard wire. I think that was labelled as a VT-V6, some sort of fuel line down near the tank from memory. But yeah, as I said, I just looked on the shelf to find something suitable and that was pretty much perfect. I had to cut maybe 50 mil off the end of the rubber down to the hose clamp in the bottom here where it goes onto the hard line. This line here is the factory VN V8 line. It's the high pressure, it runs down the bottom to the fitting here, comes around down to the side of the chassis rail, runs along the chassis rail, and then down it's got a couple of bends in it to join onto the rack. So you can see the two fittings on the back. The hard line one with the 90-degree bend is the high pressure line, and the one with the rubber hose is the low pressure return. I did have VL lines on this. The VL line had some really weird kinks and fittings up the top, so I took that off and used the VN V8 one, which fits perfect. There are some differences in the pumps too, I found out whilst doing this. To get a nice straight line down to the pulley on the harmonic balancer, I had to space out the power steering bracket. As you can see there, I put some washers in there. Let's call them performance shims. So I've had to space the bracket out. The reason being there are two different lengths in the shaft on the power steering pumps from the center of the pulley back to the body of the pump. It's about 10 or 12 mil from memory, but yeah, there's definitely a long and a short. So I had to space the pump out to get that nice straight alignment to the harmonic balancer. Okay, so moving under the car, it's pretty difficult to try and film this, but you can see the intermediate shaft there. I've used the standard VL steering column and VL power steering intermediate shaft. That comes down and mates onto a VN Commodore rack. It's just the standard rack. It's not one from a Statesman or Calais or anything like that with the Variotronic, just the standard VN V6 or VN V8 rack. I believe they're both the same. That all is a straight bolt up, and all the width of the steering rack and everything exactly the same. The reason I use the VN rack is I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it here, but where the two fittings come into the rack there, they actually come off on a slightly different angle to the VL rack, which gives you a little bit more clearance around the headers. I'll try and move this clutch cable and see if you can see them any better. So, no, not really. The two fittings there, they come off on a slightly different angle. It gives you more clearance to the steering. As you can see, there's not a heap of room next to the steering, the body of the pump to the extractors and the collector. The headers I've used are from like the VN through VS HSV series. I believe they also come on the VN Calais or maybe the Statesmans. VN Statesmans have these tight block hugging extractors, so they give you the best clearance. And again, they're all factory. So factory flange, factory Y piece, comes down, joins the other side, goes back and merges. It actually all bolted up to the exhaust system I had in this when it was a RB20 turbo. So that was a pretty big fluke that everything bolted up perfect. Okay, and from the top, trying to get this to focus on the intermediate shaft. You can see the VL intermediate shaft going down through there, and then down beside the header there, down to the coupling where it bolts to the rack. So the next thing I want to do today is go ahead and we'll pull this power steering pump out. I've got an issue with it, it's not leaking or anything, but I'm not getting any fluid pumped through the rack to give me any power assistance. So I'll go ahead and pull that out now. So the first thing I'm going to remove is I'll get this return line off. Pretty simple, just one little hose clamp. There's a pretty tight fit on the hose, so it'll be quite firm to take off. Okay, return line off. I might move on to the high pressure line. Okay, you can probably see I've rigged up an ice cream container down there to catch all the mess that I'm about to make. So I'll jump in now and take off that high pressure hose. Before I do, I'll just show you the tool I'm going to use. I don't know, most of you might know about them, but I didn't. I've always just used a normal pipe spinner to do it, but I borrowed this from a mate. It's a crow's claw pipe spinner, so you chuck on the end of a breaker bar, obviously. You just get a whole heap more torque and be able to access different areas that you could with the spinner. Yeah, super handy. I hadn't heard of them, so I just thought I'd give you a look before I start. Okay, here comes the mess. Not as bad as I thought. All right, let's go ahead and undo the 4 bolts. There's 2 on the back, 2 on the front. When you are taking them off and putting power steering pumps back on, just remember that the bolts are different lengths. They do protrude a different amount into the body. Top bolt on the front. That one wasn't too tight. Okay, this last bolt's a bit hard to get a shot on. I'll just jump underneath. You can see there's the pulley. You can see where it is. The spanner's on the nut there now, on the bolt. So I'll go ahead and pull that one out. Well, from up the top, you can see it here as well. That's it there. Okay, that's the last of the power steering pump bolts have been removed from the bracket. I might just take this radiator hose off to make it a bit easier to get the pump out. Then I'll pull the belt off and pull the power steering pump out. Okay, I'm going to loosen off the 2 bolts that allow the bracket to pivot on the front of the head, just to make it a bit easier to get some tension out of that belt before I try and remove it. Won't have to take them right out, just loosen them off so I can turn the bracket. Okay, so with those 3 bolts loosened off, it should now just be a matter of pushing the pump back, taking that belt off, and then we'll be able to pull the pump straight out of the bracket. Just like that. Okay, so what I have here on the bench in front of us is 2 power steering pumps. The one on the left is obviously the one we just took out, and the one on the right here, this is the reservoir and the rebuilt pump that I bought off eBay. That I fitted to the car. As soon as I filled it with fluid, it leaked. They are just like a press fit, an interference fit. The body of the pump goes into the reservoir, and the only thing that really holds them in there once they're out of the car is the pressure relief valve goes on and presses the reservoir onto the back of the pump. And then once you put it in the car, these two bolts here also hold it in and put more pressure from the back of the reservoir onto the body of the pump. And then the two holes in the front hold it into the bracket. So, as I said, the one I got from eBay is a rebuilt pump. This one leaked straight away. So I pulled it out and tried the old one. The old one didn't pump fluid. I did put a rebuild kit through that, which is just all the O-rings and seals. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull this one apart and I'm going to try putting the rebuilt pump into the old reservoir that never leaked. It got a good seal around here. Put them together, and then I'm going to use the pressure relief valve from the new rebuilt pump as well. I'm thinking that's what my problem was with this one, that it wouldn't pump fluid. It just wasn't getting any fluid out to the rack. So I'll go ahead and pull that apart. Okay, so that was heaps tighter than it needed to be. As you can see, I've got the pressure relief valve off. That's the only thing keeping the reservoir in the body of the pump. So inside that pressure relief valve, we obviously have a spring and the valve itself. Sit them out of the way. And we should be able to press this reservoir off the pump just by hand. You shouldn't really pull it out. You'll see it's just a rubber O-ring that goes in there that holds it together. There you go. That's literally all it holds. It's just an O-ring. As I said before, interference fit into here, just presses in nice and tight. But what I'm going to try and do, I'm thinking I might use the pump that I bought that was rebuilt, that leaked. You can see an O-ring just fell out of it. I'll put that back in. So this is the brand new rebuilt pump that leaked. But I put it down to this reservoir not being right. There's a slight oval section. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this rebuilt pump in the old reservoir, and I'm going to use the new pressure relief valve because I think that's what the issue was. All right, put that together. Take this one out. Should see on the inside should be much the same. So there's our fitting for the high pressure line. We then have the valve and a spring. On this new one, you'll see it doesn't have the piece on the top. It doesn't have a like a Phillips head slot. I don't know what that's for or why it's there, but other than that, they look to be much the same. Same spring, same tension, same size valve. I don't know what was going on with it and why it wouldn't work, but anyway, I might put this one in the old body. You do also have to make sure if you're ever playing with one of these that the little magnet's still on the inside. What the magnet's job is to, obviously, is catch any little stray bits of metal that go in so they don't end up in your power steering rack. So before I put it back in, we'll make sure all the O-rings are still in place. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to use the new rubber that I put in the old pump, just because I know that one didn't leak in this reservoir. So I'll go ahead and I'll pick out the old seal. So when I say old, it's actually new. It was supposed to be a rebuilt pump. So I'll take that O-ring out, sit him aside, and I'll get the O-ring that I bought in the kit that I know sealed well to the old reservoir. Being careful not to damage it, of course. So I'll just inspect it for any damage or any little bits of grit that might not let it seal properly. One little bit there. All right. Okay, so that's all in. The seal's nice and clean, as is the mating surfaces, the outside of the pump, inside of the reservoir. One little bit of grit there. Okay, so what I've done, I laid the pump flat on the table lined up the 3 holes and pressed the cover on as close as I could get it to lining up with the holes. Now I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but you can see in there it looks just off center. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and put in the bolts one by one. I'll just give it a little tap around on the reservoir till I get it exactly lined up perfect, and then I'll get one bolt in. I won't tighten anything down until I can be sure I can get all 3 bolts in. That looks pretty good there. Let's see if I can get a bolt in it. Okay, so that's pretty good there. We'll try the other one. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. They're both going in nice and freely, which means they must be lined up. So what I'll do now is I'll put that pressure relief valve in. First is the spring, and then the valve, and then lastly the fitting. I'll just inspect the O-ring. O-ring's still good. Okay, happy with that. All 3 are in and doing up nice and easy. I will now go ahead and tighten down the high pressure line fitting. Alright, that's snug. I'm not going to do it up as tight as it was before. I'll just give it one little nip up. That should do it. Okay, I'm going to get this dried and cleaned up and back in the car. Okay, the reinstallation of this is pretty much just the reversal of the removal, so I won't bore you too much. I'll go ahead and throw this pump back in. Okay, so everything's back together. Got the high and low pressure lines back on the back of the pump. The wiring's connected again. Radiator hose back on, belt on, tensioned up, tightened up against the car, and then I put some fluid in it, and of course, started to leak. So I don't know, it looks like it's leaking out the front where the reservoir meets the pump. Super annoying that leaked. What I think I'll do now is I'll pull that pump back out, and I'm going to use the old pump in the old reservoir with the pressure relief valve off the back of the new pump. I'll put that back together and throw it in. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to have to track down another pump. But what I'm going to do in the meantime, I'll finish this video off and get it up online for you guys to watch, and I'll have a follow-up very shortly. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.